Good afternoon. Welcome to the Weekly Livestock Market Update. I'm Brownfield anchor reporter Megan Grebner. With us, as always, University of Missouri, Scott Brown. Good afternoon, Scott.
Good afternoon, Megan.
Plenty to talk about this week with reports, as well as Hurricane Florence, some more African swine fever. But to get things started, let's kick off and review what happened this week in the markets.
Sure. If we look at cattle first today, if we look at live cattle this week, I'll call them about $2.75 higher for the week relative to a week ago, while feeder cattle were also higher, 2 to 4 higher this week. On the futures side of the equation, the live cattle October futures contract was down $1 this week, while the October feeder cattle contract closed down 75 cents. If we look at that choice box beef price, it was frankly unchanged relative to where we were a week ago. We did get strength in ribs and loins this week on the beef side, but weakness in the rest of the products pretty much canceled out for no change in that choice box beef price. Good news on the pork side again this week, Megan, as we look at cash barrel and gilt prices that were nearly $6 higher this week. That lean hog futures contract for October was also up nearly $4 for the week. Even on the pork side, we moved higher with the pork cutout value more than $7 higher this week relative to a week ago, with strength across the board in all those pork cutout components. Bellies continue to lead the way in terms of those increases.
I think we have to talk about some of the outside influence in support for pork prices. We've seen Hurricane Florence, the impact there. We're still not running at full slaughter capacity. More cases of African swine fever have been discovered or finally reported. What opportunity does this present for producers as we've seen those hog prices claw their way back?
Yeah, I do think it provides some opportunity, and I think producers ought to be looking at ways to reduce risk. When you look at where we've been, I think the combination of some lower hog runs as weather has created a problem for what would be a normal run has helped us on that side in the short run, as well as there's a lot of interesting demand that could come from a full outbreak of African swine fever, either in China or, as we think about it, in Europe and getting closer to countries that export a lot of pork. Outbreaks in those countries could certainly give the United States an opportunity to export a lot more product. So I remind folks, despite what was just a few weeks ago a pretty dismal situation in terms of where pork prices are, a lot better today, and perhaps it's time to think about at least a way to get a floor under those prices given where we are today. As I said, there could be a lot of upside potential if you get a full-bore outbreak of African swine fever, but let's at least think about some risk management given where we are in these markets today.
Scott, I would also think that we have to talk a little bit about hog weights. We know, and we'll know more about the hog pork sector next week as Hogs and Pigs report comes out. But the fact that we pulled ahead some hogs, we've not been able to run at full slaughter capacity. Do we get a little nervous that all of this ground that we've gained and regained goes away if we see some pretty big hog weights in the coming weeks?
That's my concern. I think when you still look at where we are, we're likely going to run some weeks here in another month or so that will rival what we can do on the capacity side. And if those weights return, we're going to talk about perhaps record pork production on a weekly basis as we get in the very latter part here of 2018. So I do worry about that weakness. It's just a tough market right now to talk about, because you've got a lot of this uncertainty that could just really push prices even higher than where we are. Yet you have what I think are supplies that are going to overhang the market for much of the latter part of 2018.
All right, plenty for us to talk about as we get into reports. Let's start first with livestock slaughter. And I think the one thing you take away from it, Scott, is that there's a lot of meat.
There's a mountain of meat out there, I guess we could say. If you look at what we got out of that August report, it was an all-time record on a monthly basis for red meat production. I don't think that's the last time we're going to say that here as we look through the next few months. We totaled 4.7 billion pounds of red meat production in August. That was up 3% from a year ago levels. If you look at year to date, we're sitting now at 35.3 billion pounds of red meat production that's occurred, with both beef and pork production that were 4% higher. So more supplies of those products continue to be the underlying story that I think we need to continue to pay attention to.
When we dig deeper into that report, Scott, do we get, I guess, are there some interesting facets in things that we look at? Beef cow slaughter, for example.
Yeah, I think we're continuing to kind of sit here and think about where are we at when we get 2019 beef cow inventory from USDA at the end of January. It certainly is a mixed bag. You know, I sit here in Missouri, and I will say many cattle producers will say we're liquidating very, very quickly in Missouri, and I think as a response to the dry weather we've seen here. If you look at some other areas, so I'll take Region 6 federally inspected beef cow slaughter is 11% higher, and that's primarily Texas and Oklahoma. And so that's shows you what happens when you have a dry weather situation. Yet I want to make sure that we think about this from a full national perspective. Region 4, which I go southeast, so think all those southeast states are actually 8.4% below a year ago level when you look at beef cow slaughter, which just reminds me that good weather, we're looking to add cows. And I think we might see a situation where it will be a mixed bag when we get the report, with declines in places like Missouri, Texas, Oklahoma, but likely some increases in the southeast part of the United States. So we'll wait and see. But the report certainly shows that weather has played an important role in cow inventories in the different states around the country this year.
And I would assume not just in as we look at cow inventories, but also some of those cattle that are getting placed into feedlots.
A big report today, big in a number of ways, I guess, Megan. So if we start at looking at cattle on feed, placements in August came in at 107.4. That was outside the range of pre-report estimates and well above the 104.8 average. So placed a lot of calves. I like to remind us, as I think many of us anticipated, a lot of lightweight calves got placed in August. Relative to a year ago, the less than 600-pound category was up about 70,000 head. The 6 to 699 category up about 50,000 head. The 7 to 799 up 42,000 head. Then we were down in the next two categories slightly. So probably pulled some lighter weight calves off of some dry weather pasture into the feed yard sooner than otherwise, and that's certainly showing up in this report. If you look at on feed as of September 1st, it came in at 105.9. It just cozied right up to the upper end of the range pre-report estimates. So we continue to talk about a lot of cattle, but perhaps weather driven. We're just placing earlier, and we might see a little better news as we get in the latter part of 2018 in terms of placements.
When we think about Monday morning after the open, what are some? Have we traded this into it this week, or is it going to be a little bit of a shocker when markets open on Monday?
Yeah, I wish I knew the answer to that question for sure. However, I will say that I think many of us knew we were going to place more animals in August. So I think markets were anticipating larger placement numbers. I doubt they anticipated just quite a large placement as we did see out of that report. So I expect we get a little bit of drag as a result of that. But I still think, for me, the beef side of this complex really interesting in that when you look at what's been larger supplies, demand has frankly been running at a faster pace than the supply side has. And I think that will continue to be the story for a period of time. So I don't expect a major correction occurring right now. But it's certainly not great news for the cattle industry to talk about what's going to be higher placements. I just think we're going to get in the latter part and maybe see placements start to move a little lower than we would have thought otherwise.
I think we talk about risk management a lot. I feel like that whole downside risk is really volatile right now with all of the uncertainties and unknowns as we continue to play this trade game and all of the other factors coming into the global meat supply and demand game.
Yeah, so I would agree that, we talked about pork already. I think there's similar opportunities in cattle right here to do a little downside risk management. And again, it's how do I make sure I get that floor in place and maybe give myself a little bit of chance for some upside opportunity. But I think doing nothing might not be the best strategy right now, just given where we are in cattle prices as well.
All right, Scott, reports next week. Another pretty big week for reports.
Yeah, that's right. So we're going to get cold storage on Monday, see what kind of freezer stocks we have of red meats, and that may be a market mover for us. Then coming up on Thursday is that hogs and pigs report. Certainly going to be interesting to see how many sows we have on hand. I know we'll probably be up for the 10th consecutive quarter in a row, but hopefully the rate of growth is slowing a little bit on that sow side. And we'll finish the week with the restaurant performance index on Friday.
And sadly, I'm a hog girl, and I won't get to talk hogs and pigs with you next Friday. I will be out, and Mr. Tom Stever will be in the chair for me. So we will talk to you next week.
Great.
To have our weekly livestock market update delivered to your email box every Saturday morning, visit our website, brownfieldagnews.com. You can click subscribe. You can also submit questions and comments there. And for market updates twice daily, make sure to check out John Perkins' Market Minute. Have a great weekend. I'm Megan Grebner for Brownfield.